to Emer Higgins.
I want to begin by saying that I wholeheartedly condemn the violent attacks that we are currently seeing in the occupied Palestinian territory and in Israel. I think many Irish people feel a particular affinity with the people of Palestine, and I certainly feel that strongly. It is truly heartbreaking to hear of the number of innocent people who have died and who've had their lives destroyed. Children who have needlessly lost their lives in this conflict, killed senselessly in a conflict that began many, many years before they were even born. It's been a year of particularly unstable conditions. Israel has intensified its deadly military raids in West Bank, and that's been met with a rising number of Palestinian armed attacks targeting Israelis. Over 30 Israelis have been killed and at least 160 Palestinians have died as a result of this war in just the past 7 months alone. What's happening in the West Bank is nothing short of inhumane. And last week we saw what was the single biggest assault in 2 decades, with Israeli forces using drone strikes to kill and to wound so many innocent people in a packed public area, using armoured diggers to destroy settlements, people's homes. Utter destruction doesn't even begin to describe it. 12 Palestinians, including 4 teenagers and 1 Israeli soldier, were killed during the 2-day incursion in the occupied West Bank last week. And Israel's excuse? Well, the Palestinians who were killed were combatants. Teenage and child combatants. One of those was a 16-year-old Palestinian boy, Abdul, who was shot in the head outside Al-Mal hospital on the 2nd day of the military incursion. He was unarmed. He was killed for no reason at all. And I, like so many others, feel such anger for Abdul and for all of the innocent men, women and children who continue to die in this conflict. I've been to the West Bank before. I've stood in places like Jerusalem, like Bethlehem, like Ramallah. I crossed the border at Kulandina alone in the darkness of night. I was in Hebron during Passover, and that's a day I will never forget. And I've recalled this story on the record before, and I've done that because it really genuinely was a profound moment for me. And it changed my understanding of the dynamics of the conflict too. Because on that day, hundreds of heavily armed Israeli soldiers burst out of a closed military zone to take temporary control of a Palestinian town I was in. And I watched as Israeli soldiers banged on the doors of Palestinian homes and barged their way into their home to gain illegal access to their roof. And there they stayed, sniper in hand. And they were doing all of this, allegedly, to provide armed security to a tour group visiting religious sites on Palestinian territory. There were 8 armed soldiers for every person on that tour, we counted. And I can clearly remember standing on a side street in Hebron and looking up through a caged roof that was burnt through in places by acid thrown down from a settlement. And I remember counting 8 snipers aimed at us. And the sheer tension and the fear is nothing that I'll ever forget, because what's different for me there and where I see soldiers anywhere else abroad is that I knew they weren't there to protect me. I knew they weren't there to keep the peace. They were there to protect only certain people. And that was an experience for me, but for people living there, innocent men, women and children, that is everyday life. In fact, that's probably a good day. And right now, it's a million times worse than that. And I can only imagine what it must be like in Gaza. People are living in fear and in hopelessness, and it's wrong and it's illegal. It's contravening international law, expanding settlements in the West Bank, demolishing the homes of Bedouins, forced evictions in East Jerusalem, violence on holy sites. These are grave, illegal crimes. And every day, those actions contribute to rising tensions and what feels like inevitable bloodshed and deaths. And it's up to us, and it's up to countries like us, to stand up for those people caught in that crossfire, to work with our truly inspiring ambassador from Palestine to Ireland, Her Excellency Gillian, to put an end to people dying needlessly every day, to families being torn apart, to communities being destroyed. And last count, Corla, I think we also need to raise our voice when it comes to Belarus too. Last month, I had the absolute honour of meeting with Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, the leader of the United Transition Cabinet of Belarus, who is living in exile in Lithuania. And her husband, Sergei, is a political prisoner with no access to legal representations. And up until last week, she had no idea whether her husband was alive or dead. And so many of us breathed a sigh of relief when proof of life was provided just a couple of days ago. Proof that her husband is still alive and still strong. Svetlana and her team are doing their utmost from Lithuania to represent the people of Belarus. The Lukashenko regime, in my view, has become a key enabler of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. They've hosted Russian troops, they've allowed missiles to be fired from their territory, and Putin announced that they would become home to Russian nuclear weapons. The EU has brought in sanctions against Belarus as well as Russia, but we need to do more if we're to protect the people of Belarus and the people of Ukraine. Our affinity with the people of Palestine must continue to be developed because we are a key ally for them in a David and Goliath situation. And I think we should also be replicating that affinity to so many countless other countries across the world that are also in turmoil because of dictators or illegal occupations. We are a small island nation, but our diaspora and our voice is one of the strongest in the whole world. When Ireland speaks up, Ireland is heard. That is why we must continue to speak up for the people of Palestine and for people like Svetlana, who are doing all they can in the face of a very hostile regime.